Welcome to Access Asia, I'm Yuka Royer. Coming up in this edition, China drafts a new law aimed at strengthening ethnic unity, raising concern it could bolster Beijing's ideological controls. We'll take a look at the controversial bill with Human Rights Watch's Asia Director Elaine Pearson. Shein sets up shop in France, real, permanent brick-and-mortar stores. But will the ultra-fashion juggernaut win over French consumers? And a silver medal on home turf for Dharamveer. The Indian club thrower paralysed from the waist down has added another prize to his impressive track record at the World Para-Athletics Championships in New Delhi. China has quietly proposed a new law that would provide legal backing for President Xi Jinping's drive to enforce ideological and cultural uniformity. Submitted to Beijing's rubber-stamp parliament, National People's Congress, last month, the draft law on promoting ethnic unity and progress would compel parents to educate and guide minors to love the Chinese Communist Party, ban acts that damage ethnic unity, and promote Mandarin as the dominant language. NGO Human Rights Watch has analysed the 62-article bill and warns that once passed, it could be used to justify repression of ethnic minorities like Tibetans and Uyghurs. Well, for more on the group's findings, we can bring in Elaine Pearson, Human Rights Watch's Asia Director. Thank you, Elaine, for being with us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, China under President Xi Jinping has been intensifying efforts to assimilate and crack down on ethnic minorities. Why does it want to tighten ideological control now with a new law?
Well, I think this is part of, a broader effort under Xi Jinping to try and erase individual ethnic cultural identity, language, religion. We've seen this playing out in the policies and practices in places like Xinjiang against Uyghurs, in Tibet against Tibetans. And really what this law is just a way of signaling to the bureaucracy that, this is going to be this effort to try and unite the country and erase individual ethnic identity is the direction that the country is following. And so I think we will see an escalation in the crackdown on anyone who is proposing Tibetan or Uyghur rights. They will be defined as, separatists. And we've already seen, people being criminalised, simply for promoting Tibetan language, for instance.
So is this really the first time that a broad legal framework is given to that kind of effort?
So, we have seen, similar decrees in the past issued on religion, talking about redefining religion with Chinese Communist Party characteristics. But this is actually the first time that we've seen a law of this kind that really provides that legal framework on, setting out the steps on the way that the Communist Party, that individuals and enterprises basically should be getting behind the Communist Party to prevent any acts that undermine national unity.
The bill also targets Chinese people and organizations abroad, the Chinese diaspora. What's the aim here then?
We've seen the case of a 22-year-old Chinese student who was studying in France. When she went back to China, she's subsequently been arrested and she's facing potentially up to 15 years in prison for encouraging splitism and undermining national unity. So I think we will see more prosecutions like that. What was this Chinese student doing? She was simply trying to profile Tibetans, Tibetan musicians. She was trying to promote better understanding online. And I think the Chinese government has a lot to fear from that. Now they're saying, we're watching you, we're surveilling you, and if you come back to China, we'll take action against you, or potentially, they could take action against family members in China.
So are there any other provisions in this 62-article bill that target action or even language used online?
Well, the language is very vague, as it often is. And so, it really talks about, for instance, families should not be doing anything that is teaching their children concepts that are detrimental to ethnic identity. Now, what exactly does that mean? It also talks about educating and guiding children to love the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this is clearly, an invasion of privacy and what happens in the home. But, I think what we'll see as a result is people will become fearful to speak in local ethnic languages at home. We're already seeing practices on the ground in places like Tibet, where at kindergarten, kids are being, taught in Mandarin and are forgetting Tibetan. In places like Xinjiang, people are afraid to say salam alaikum. They will say, ni hao, because they don't want to, have any scrutiny from the authorities. We're seeing mosques being repurposed as Chinese buildings, and so they less become a place to pray and they become more, a tourist attraction. And so I think this is all part of the Chinese government's efforts to try and unify the country. But in doing so, they are systematically erasing the individual ethnic identities of these groups that have, very long histories of art and culture and traditions.
Well, Elaine Pearson from Human Rights Watch, thank you so much for your insights. Ultra-fast fashion juggernaut Shein plans to open 6 stores in France. Right in the middle of the Paris Fashion Week, the Chinese e-commerce platform, known for its wildly low prices, announced its first physical retail space would open in Paris in November. France 24's Charlie James has been taking a closer look. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Yuka.
So tell us more about Shein's announcement.
Right. So here in France, Shein has partnered with the commercial real estate company SGM to open its first permanent retail stores. There's been pop-up shops before in France, in Spain, but never a permanent physical store. Like you said, the first one's going to open here in Paris next month, and that's going to be quickly followed by 5 other cities, including Angers, Grenoble, and Dijon. And the stores are actually going to be located inside of big department stores, too, called BHV and Galeries Lafayette. The department store locations that Shein is moving into, they're owned by SGM, and Shein is calling them shop-in-shop outlets. Shein says it chose France because it's an influential fashion market, and says its clothes are particularly popular in more rural areas where shoppers have less choice, which might be why we're seeing these smaller cities as locations for the shops instead of Marseille or Lyon, for example. So SGM, for its side, says that it hopes that Shein being in its department stores can help attract a younger audience
to the department stores. Now, targeting rural areas, but Shein chose Paris, a global fashion capital, for its brick-and-mortar debut. What has the reaction been then? Is the ultra-fashion brand bienvenue ici?
It hasn't been great, honestly, and the backlash, it's coming from many directions. So the Galeries Lafayette department stores that Shein is moving into, they're owned by SGM, and it's a franchise situation. So the parent company of Galeries Lafayette opposes the move and says it's going to try to keep it from happening. They say that it violates its franchise agreement because it's against company values. French fashion brands also mad. The head of a French fashion retail association says that Shein has already destroyed dozens of French brands who can't keep up with the rock-bottom prices, and that these shops are just going to flood the market with more what he called disposable items. The government, no fan of Shein either. The brand seen as contradictory to government values such as environmentalism and workers' rights. And just back in July, France hit Shein with a 40 million euro fine for what it found to be deceptive commercial practices around advertising and pricing. So finally, there's a change.org petition that's calling for a full-on ban of Shein in France, and it currently has over 250,000 signatures. That said, Yuka, we all know that money talks, and France is one of the top 5 markets in the world for Shein. So people here are buying it, and that's the paradox of this backlash.
Now, Shein globally, its success is built around its business model of making things for cheap in China and then shipping them all over the world. Why do they even want physical stores?
Right, physical stores, they're known for being expensive and difficult to run, but it's because the structure that Shein built this multi-billion-dollar business on, it's disappearing. So the U.S. market was far and away the biggest in the world for Shein. But when President Donald Trump started the upping tariffs and got rid of the duty exemption for low-value parcels, it had a huge impact on Shein's business model.
The de minimis exemption.
Right, exactly. And Shein's U.S. sales dropped by 11%. So Shein has to adapt, and it's looking to Europe to make up the gap, make up the difference. So it's upped its advertising in Europe, and now with these shops, these physical stores, it wants to test ways to become less reliant on shipping goods all over the world. So we'll see if it works, because the European Union is also looking at getting rid of these duty exemptions for low-value packages, and the French government not exactly welcoming Shein with open arms. But like I said, if people are buying, in the end, it's going to be the consumers who decide whether these Shein stores are a welcome addition to the French fashion landscape or not.
We'll see how it goes. Well, Charlie James, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Now, there was excitement and a bit of disappointment at the World Para-Athletics Championships in New Delhi as homeboy Dharanbir Nan won a silver medal in men's club throw in the F51 category. Paralysed from the waist down more than a decade ago, the 36-year-old has since built an impressive track record, winning gold in Paris last year, 2 silver medals at the Asian Championships and a bronze at the previous World Championships. Our correspondents tell us more with this report.
When I learned that I could never walk again, it felt horrible. And I thought that there was no point in living.
In 2012, Dharanbir Nan lost the use of his legs after a diving accident in a river. Bedridden for a year, the para-athletic universe felt unreachable.
Before that, I used to avoid it when people told me about para games and that I could try it. I used to think, these people would just say this and go away. A person who can't even lift a glass of water by himself, how can he play?
But his life took a new turn after meeting another Indian para-athlete. Nan went on to specialise in club throw, competing on the biggest stages, from the Asian Games to the Rio 2016 Paralympics, and finally Paris 2024, where he claimed the gold medal.
When we represent on the international stage, we feel very proud. One of the most moving moments is when we hear our national anthem abroad.
This sports centre in the outskirts of New Delhi is one of the few training facilities in the country that can welcome para-athletes. For his training, Nan can rely on the support of his cousins.
I feel proud of him. He went to Paris and won the medal. The whole village was so enthusiastic. Everyone is behind him.
As well as his silver medal, Dharanbir Nan has been the flag bearer of the Indian para-athletics delegation for the World Championships in New Delhi. An honour and a message of hope for all young Indians living with disabilities.
That's all for this edition of Access Asia. Thanks for watching, but do stay tuned if you can. There's more world news coming up here on France 24.